You learn a lot about a town by the way it handles its gossip. In Birch Hollow, gossip didn't travel, it lingered. Like perfume after a funeral. My name is Miriam Coleridge. And I've been sewing the town's secrets for 40 years. Birth, dresses, wedding gowns, and the occasional morning alteration. The fabric always tells you who people are when words won't. I'm 76 now, though my mirror still argues. I live in the same clapboard house on the edge of town where my husband built his workshop, and then, one summer, built his excuses. He's been buried 20 years, but I still hear his lies when the wind blows through the shed. Every Thursday evening, 4 of us meet in the back of the old community hall, the Sewing Circle. A polite name for what it used to be, a tribunal of women too old to be ignored and too experienced to be fooled. There's Ruth, who runs the post office and has never once lost a letter. Clara, who still wears black for a husband who doesn't deserve it. Evelyn, quiet as folded linen but with eyes sharp enough to thread guilt through a needle. And me, the one who keeps the minutes, not on paper, but in memory. We say we gather to mend things, but some tears aren't in fabric. It started when Clara brought a letter, one that had never reached its destination. The envelope was old, edges crisped by time. The address smudged but still legible. To Sheriff Paul Denton, Birch Hollow. Clara said she'd found it hidden behind a loose brick in the post office wall, the kind of hiding place used by people who think they're clever. I took it, held it to the light. The ink had bled, but I could still make out a few words. If anything happens to me, it was not an accident. The signature was a woman's. Martha Denton, the sheriff's first wife, dead 35 years. Ruth crossed herself. He said she drowned in the quarry, she whispered. He said a lot of things, I replied. Men often do when there's no one left to correct them. We sat in silence while the ceiling fan stirred the air like a nervous hand. Finally, Evelyn said we could hand it to the new sheriff. I looked at her, kind, naive Evelyn. And let them file it under too old to matter. No. We'll find out ourselves. Ruth leaned back, smiling faintly. The sewing circle rides again. And just like that. 4 women who the town thought were harmless picked up a thread that had been waiting 35 years to be pulled. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to my workshop, the smell of cedar and mothballs wrapping around me like a shawl. On the wall hung my old sewing shears, long, heavy. The kind you could cut truth with if you tried hard enough. I laid the letter on the table and smoothed it flat with my palm. Beneath the faded ink, I saw a faint indentation, words written over something else. I rubbed a soft pencil across the paper, and the ghost writing appeared like bruises rising to skin. If Paul finds out, tell Miriam. My name, written before I'd even known her. The clock ticked once, twice, then stopped. Outside, the wind picked up, the kind that makes the windows sigh. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my apron pocket, and whispered to the dark. All right, Martha. I'm listening. Asterisk the sewing circle. Hard to buy morning. The letter felt heavier than paper should. It sat on my kitchen table beside a pot of black coffee, catching the sunlight like something alive. Birch Hollow woke slow, same as always, the milk truck rattling down Maple Street. The church bell coughing its single note of duty, but I felt a shift under all of it, a tension like a pulled thread waiting to snap. When Ruth stopped by, she didn't bother knocking. None of us do anymore. There's no need for formality among the guilty or the old. Couldn't sleep, she asked. Couldn't forget, I said. Handing her the letter, she squinted at the faint ghost of writing. Tell Miriam. You sure that's your name? Either that, or the dead found another seamstress in town. She made a sound between a sigh and a prayer. You know what this means, don't you? It means Martha didn't drown, I said. And it means the sheriff's story doesn't float either. That afternoon, the circle met at the hall. The place smelled of starch and old varnish. Sunlight fell through the blinds in narrow stripes across our table, turning the dust to glitter. Evelyn brought tea, Clara brought the courage, and I brought the letter. We passed it around like communion. Evelyn whispered, I remember the night she died. Whole town was out looking. Paul said she went swimming to cool off after the fair. They found her dress caught on a root, never her shoes. She was terrified of water, I said, wouldn't even wash clothes by the river. Ruth nodded slowly, so maybe she didn't walk into it. Maybe she was carried. We decided to start small, questions first, accusations later. Ruth still handled old mail routes, so she promised to look through the archive for anything addressed to Martha around the time she vanished. Clara would check the church registry for burial notes. Evelyn, bless her heart, would charm the sheriff's deputy into finding the old case file. And me, I'd visit the quarry. The path hadn't changed, narrow dirt track lined with willow roots like gnarled fingers. The water below was dark, still, and mean. They said kids came here sometimes to throw rocks. I wondered if any of them ever felt the chill of what was beneath. I walked along the edge, slow. My knees complained, my heart did not. There was a patch of land, higher than the rest, where the grass grew strangely thin. I crouched there and brushed the soil with my hand. Something hard caught my palm, a button. Mother of pearl, faintly pink, cracked down the middle. The kind you only find on hand-sewn dresses. I pocketed it. On my way back, I passed Sheriff Denton's old house, now his son's. The same paint. The same porch swing. History doesn't die here, it just changes who holds the keys. And on the porch, rocking slow as guilt, sat Paul Dentinger. He looked up. Mrs. Coleridge. Haven't seen you in years. Still got your father's eyes, I said. He smiled, thin as wire. I hope not. That night Ruth called. You won't believe this, she said. I found a stack of letters from Martha, all returned. He never sent them out. Postmarked but never mailed. I felt my chest tighten. All of them, every last one. Except the one we found in the wall. Evelyn joined the call, her voice a whisper of static. The deputy says the case feels gone, logged as misplaced in '89. Of course it was. Ladies, I said, it seems we've stumbled onto an untold story. Clara exhaled sharply. Then let's tell it. After we hung up, I set Martha's letter beside the button and the growing list of names I'd started scribbling in a ledger, every person who'd helped bury her truth. When I closed my notebook, I said it out loud for the first time. The sewing circle will stitch this one shut. Asterisk the sewing circle, part 3. The next morning broke brittle and bright. Birch Hollow always looked innocent in sunlight, as if all its sins evaporated with the dew. But sunlight only hides what shadow remembers. I walked to town early, my sewing basket on my arm, a disguise that had served me for decades. No one suspects a woman carrying thread. That's how most revolutions begin, in plain sight, with a thimble and patience. At the post office, Ruth had already spread out the stack of returned letters like cards in a seance. The ink had faded to a ghostly brown, but the handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, careful. The loops on the Y's full of hesitation. Read this one, she said, sliding one across the counter. It's the last before she disappeared. I put on my spectacles. The words wavered, then settled. Paul, if you don't tell them, I will. I can't keep lying to the preacher, the neighbors, or myself. She's growing faster now, I can't hide her much longer. You said we'd fix this, but all you've fixed is your face for Sunday. There was a date at the bottom, 3 weeks before the drowning. I folded the letter carefully. She's growing faster now. You think, Ruth nodded grimly. Pregnant. We let the word hang there between us like smoke. She was 25, I said quietly. And no children buried with her. Ruth glanced around the empty post office. Maybe not buried. That night, the sewing circle met at Clara's house. The kettle hissed like a restless ghost while Evelyn poured the tea. I laid the letter in the center of the table. Martha was pregnant, I said. And Paul Denton made sure no one ever saw the child. Clara's jaw clenched. That man walked my sister down the aisle. He gave eulogies, Miriam. I know, I said. That's why this town still calls him Saint Denton. Because he wrote the story himself? Evelyn, timid but steady, said, if there was a child, someone must know. We all looked at Ruth. She handled mail, gossip, and rumor with equal skill. She nodded. There was a midwife back then. Old Miss Greedy. Died 10 years ago. But her daughter still lives out by the orchard. I'll go tomorrow. The following evening. Ruth returned with a showbox. Inside were yellowed index cards, names, notes, a ledger of births that the town never officially recorded. And in one corner, under the year 1988, was a single entry, female infant, no father listed, mother, N.D. Martha Denton. No adoption, no follow-up, no signature of death. She lived, Ruth whispered, at least for a while. The next step came to me like instinct. Paul Jr., the son, would have known. He'd been 15 then, old enough to notice, young enough to obey. I found him outside the old sheriff's house again, oiling the porch swing. He smiled when he saw me. "Afternoon, Mrs. Coleridge, you back for another history lesson?" Something like that, I said. "Tell me, Paul, did your father ever mention your half-sister?" The swing creaked. His hand froze on the rag. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I don't know what you're talking about." I took the button from my pocket, held it up to the light. "Your mother's dress," I said. "Found it by the quarry. Same one she wore the day she died." He swallowed. "That was an accident." "No accident leaves a child unclaimed," I interrupted. He looked at me, really looked, and something shifted behind his eyes. Regret, recognition, or maybe fear of what he'd always known. "My father," he said finally, "used to drive out to the orchard every month. Always said it was to check the land deed." I didn't ask questions. He said good sons don't. "Do you remember who lived there?" He hesitated. "A woman named June." When I told the circle that night, Evelyn nearly dropped her teacup. "June Greevy," she said. "The midwife's daughter. She'd have been about Martha's age. And if she was the one who delivered the baby," Clara added, "maybe she was the one who kept her." Ruth leaned forward. "Then the girl's still here. Maybe right under our noses." I smiled, though my chest ached with the weight of it. "Then we'll find her," I said. "And we'll let Martha's ghost finally rest, outside." The wind stirred through the trees, whispering like thread through fabric, quiet, relentless, inevitable. The next morning, mist rolled in from the fields like a slow confession. Birch Hollow didn't do fog, not often, anyway. It made the familiar look foreign, and that suited me fine. The town had been too sure of itself for too long. I met Ruth outside the orchard road. The gravel crunched underfoot, the sound of old secrets breaking. We didn't speak. The silence between us was working just as hard as we were. June Greavy's house sat half hidden by lilac bushes and disobedient roses. The porch was cluttered with jars of herbs, old shoes, and the smell of camphor. She opened the door before we knocked. "I heard you coming," she said. Her voice was a rasp, like paper dragged across wood. "You're the Coleridge woman, aren't you?" "I am," I said. "And you know why I'm here." She looked at the letter in my hand and nodded. I wondered when that thing would surface again. We followed her into the kitchen. The walls were lined with dried herbs and old photographs, faces of women, strong and unafraid. A kettle hissed on the stove. June poured tea, black as confession, and set it down in front of us. She was terrified. June began. "Martha came to me in the middle of the night. Said the sheriff was going to fix things. I told her to stay. She wouldn't. Said he'd find her anywhere. And the baby." I asked. She looked at me long, slow. "Born early. Weak, but alive." I handed her to a woman who couldn't have children of her own. They left town by dawn. No papers. No trail. "Who was she?" Ruth asked. June took a deep breath. "Clara's sister." The room went still. The only sound was the kettle sighing as it cooled. That night, the circle met at my house. The lamps cast long shadows, stretching across the wooden table like old ghosts leaning in. I didn't waste words. "Clara," I said, "we need to talk about your sister." She looked up sharply, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before, fear, maybe, or fury. "What about her?" "She took Martha Denton's baby," I said. "Raised her." The teacup in Clara's hand trembled, then stilled. "She didn't know who the mother was," she said quietly. "June told her the girl was orphaned. My sister loved that child like her own." "Where is she now?" Ruth asked. "Grown. Married. Has children of her own. Lives 3 streets from here." Evelyn whispered. "So all this time?" Clara nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "All this time, Martha's daughter was here. Right here." I kept the secret because I thought it was mercy. The silence that followed was heavy, sacred. I'd seen a lot of guilt in my life, but this was different, guilt with a heartbeat. Finally, I said, "Mercy isn't hiding the truth, Clara. It's giving it somewhere to breathe." Ruth put a hand on her shoulder. "We're not here to ruin her life, but Martha deserves her name back." Clara looked at me, pleading, breaking. "And if we tell her, what happens then?" I took the letter from my pocket and laid it on the table. The ink was fading now, curling at the edges, but the words still bled meaning. She deserves to know, I said. We all do. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside sounded like thread snapping. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. I went to my sewing table, lit the small lamp, and opened my ledger. Inside were the pieces of this story, the letters, the button, the names, the tears. And at the bottom, one line I hadn't written yet, Martha's child, truth pending. I stared at it for a long time, then began to sew. Not clothes this time, but a small square of white fabric, embroidered with one word, justice. The stitches were uneven, age does that to your hands, but every pull of the needle felt like defiance. The next day, Clara came to my door. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice was steady. She's ready to know, she said. But she wants you there. Why me? Because you've been the keeper of this story, she said. And because you've got the courage I never had. The day the truth finally broke open, the sky over Birch Hollow was white and weightless, no color, no mercy. The kind of sky that lets nothing hide. Clara and I walked together up Willow Street, her hand gripping my arm the way people do when the past starts to come loose. The woman waiting for us on the porch was young, maybe 35. Brown hair pinned neat, eyes full of suspicion and something deeper, the same blue-gray I'd seen once in a photograph of Martha Denton. Mrs. Coleridge? She asked. My aunt said you wanted to see me. That's right, I said. May we come in? Her name was Grace. Fitting, I thought, for someone carrying a story that was anything but merciful. Inside, the house smelled of bread and lemon polish. The kind of scent that tries to keep bad memories out. A baby's rattle lay on the couch. A man's coat hung by the door. Ordinary things waiting to be changed forever. We sat at her kitchen table, same shape, same size, same ghosts as all the kitchens that came before. Clara's hands trembled in her lap. I did the talking. There's something you need to know about your mother, I said. Grace frowned. My mother died when I was a baby. Aunt Clara raised me. That's true, I said softly. But she wasn't your mother by birth. The words landed like glass breaking in another room. You don't see it, but you feel the air change. She found you, I said. 35 years ago. Wrapped in a blanket, left in the care of someone who couldn't keep you safe. Grace's voice cracked. You're saying? I'm not. Your mother's name was Martha Denton, I said. And she died trying to protect you. Silence. Then a sound that wasn't quite crying, wasn't quite breathing. The sound of a soul realizing it's not who it thought it was. Clara reached across the table, tears streaking her face. We didn't mean to keep it from you. I thought I was saving you from her ghost. Grace pulled her hand away gently, eyes glistening. All my life I wondered why I hated water. Why I'd wake up dreaming I was sinking. No. She turned to me. Why tell me now? Because lies rot everything they touch, I said. Even love. We left her there, staring at a life that had just split open down the middle. Outside, the air was thick and wet, the kind of humidity that carries the sound of your own heartbeat. Ruth was waiting by the corner. Evelyn too. We didn't say much. We never had to. You don't need words when justice is a weight everyone can feel. Clara walked a few steps ahead, her shoulders shaking. She hates me, she whispered. No, I said. She's just learning the cost of truth. A week passed before Grace came to see me. She arrived at dusk, holding something wrapped in a towel. I invited her in. She laid it on the table and unwrapped it, the mother-of-pearl button I'd found by the quarry, now polished clean. I went there, she said. To the water. I needed to see it. I don't think she's down there anymore. No, I said. She isn't. Grace took my hand, the gesture small and trembling. Thank you for not letting her disappear. When she left, I sat alone a while. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock and the soft creak of the chair. I thought about all the years we'd spent sewing and mending and pretending that repair was the same as redemption. It isn't. Some fabric, once torn, should stay that way as proof it was ever whole. The sewing circle met one last time that night. No tea, no gossip. Just the four of us sitting around the table that had held too many truths to count. Evelyn said, so it's done. Done enough, I said. The sheriff's legacy will rot quietly now. His son knows. His daughter knows. The town will whisper, and that's all the justice we'll get. Clara looked up, eyes rimmed red. And what about us? I smiled. We go back to sewing. Only now we sew with clean thread. Later, when the others had gone, I took the letter, Martha's final words, and folded it once more. I slipped it into the lining of my coat where I keep things that matter. Then I went out into the night. The fog had lifted. The stars were sharp, watching. I walked to the edge of the quarry, the wind moving soft through the grass. The water lay still, black as ink, but it no longer felt cursed. I dropped the mother-of-pearl button into its depths and whispered, "For you, Martha." For all the women they tried to drown, the ripples spread slow and wide until they disappeared. And then there was nothing, just quiet, and the faint scent of lilacs on the wind.